Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Podcast, enriching life through a podcast. If you're wondering, this time Saurabh is not hasn't mentioned a podcast for human skills and mindset, and the reason is starting 2023. This is our first session we are having. We are changing and we are also evolving. And I gave a thought about what would be the Let's Talk podcast looks like. It's all about enriching life, and I think that's pretty much we will try to sum it up. So yeah, please provide our some kind of a feedback if you like this particular line which we have just attached to our podcast, and we will take it from there. So today's topic is leadership. I know there are plethora of articles, podcasts, videos, audios, version of leadership, what leadership is all about. And that made me think about why is that? So I think, I mean, based on some inspiration from Simon Sinek, is that leadership is like parenting. It's kind of it's like a health regime. You cannot say that there are five ways to become a true leader because every parent is different, every child is different, their needs are different, every body is different. So the same health regime will not work for you, which work tremendously well for me. Uh, you can have a keto diet that may works for you. Maybe intermittent fasting works for you. Maybe a strict parent can be good for a child in certain circumstances, or maybe a pretty accommodating parent who learn life lessons based on what their parents sorry mentioned that works for you. So that's why, and that's the reason why each and every human being has a different way of recognizing leadership, and that's why we have so many definitions. That being said, we always think leadership from the positive angle. When we talk about leadership as a human being, there's a general notion of thinking positive impact, thinking about something which drive results, drive society, and so on and so forth. And that is something which I was thinking about. What is the other side of leadership? Because leadership is both overstudied and understudied in terms of organizational behavior, hierarchical structure, societal structure about there. And at the same time, I would say it's understudied because it so much attached to the human behavior, which is still a kind of a deep water sea, which we have not been kind of discovered yet. So that being said, I requested our guest today to discuss about the dark side of leadership, or what we say the toxic leadership here. So please allow me to welcome Neha Mishra. Neha Mishra is a behavioral master trainer. She has so much of experience about talking and teaching leadership to different organizations, and definitely I had some conversation with her to understand what this toxic leadership is all about, and requested her to spend some time with our audience here and explain about the dark side of leadership, which is seldomly discussed. So, Neha, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Saurabh. It's absolutely a pleasure. I have been waiting to be on your show. I think you've been doing excellently well, and with the kind of speakers you've been getting, it's amazing. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for your kind words. So, before we get into the topic, would you like to enlighten our audience to learn about more your background?
I think yeah. Let's use a light word. Enlightening is very big, but I'd be happy to talk about myself. I come from a management graduate background, and after working in corporates for more than 12 years, in the field of marketing, corporate communication, I realized that one thing that binds everybody is this human connection. And I just got this excited, and the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and I thought that okay, let's just explore the side where we keep the human connection, human behavior as priority or as the milestone, and then work everything else around it. And hence the coaching, training, interventions, this part of self growth, societal development happened to me. So now, from almost 7 years, I have been my core involvement is into human capital development. I work with organizations as a capability coach, communications coach, and I also work with individuals who like to climb up the ladder in professional or personal space. So, yes, that's about me, and thoroughly enjoying it and working more and more towards uplifting my own self with the help of people like you.
Amazing. So I'm intrigued about you mentioned that you are helping people from point A to point B to kind of learn more about their life, how they can be more productive, how they can be more, I would say, in route towards the fulfillment. How exactly that develops? So obviously, not everyone is born that they will be a coach or they would be a kind of helping human being in that way. So, is there any turning point in your life which says that, okay, I think I do this better than a lot of people around me?
Okay, great. That's a great question. I mean, honestly, a lot of credit, just also to keep in line, but true, a lot of credit goes to the family I belong. I belong to the family of teachers and professors, and they all come from educational background. So I think the one thing, the very one thing I said throughout my life is that I will never enter in the field of education. No way. That's not me. I will purely be working with corporates. But look at this, look at the circle of life. I mean, very happily, I was the one who said that, okay, let's get into it. And I think there's not one incident, but many. And I will definitely want to keep it really light and not make it sound as if I changed people's life from upside
Mhm.
down, because I think I'm very, very tiny piece in that whole puzzle. But I think, yeah, when people repeatedly start consulting you and asking your opinions, and then starting to work on your opinions and come back to you and acknowledge that, that's when you feel, and like you say, right, that understanding those signs that are happening around you. So I think I am just as making my little efforts to understanding those signs that the universe is telling me every now and then. And this was one that happened a few years back. And sort of specially, I realized that this was not when I full-fledgedly got into it. This had been happening even when I was working. And you know where I'm coming from. I mean, people consult you, people look up to your advices, they change, and some of them are kind enough to come back and acknowledge it. So I think, yeah, when those kind of things started happening, I said maybe it's time to give back in my own ways. And the more you give, the more you get. And that's exactly what's happening since then.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you have to give back, and obviously, it seems what I'm hearing that you got a lot of constructive feedback from your colleagues, from your friends. They are looking forward for your advice, which made you think that which otherwise wouldn't be your career becomes your career as well. So that's pretty inspiring because that's how I think life happens. Sometimes you are pretty much you have a plan A, but you never know that your plan B becomes your plan A.
And
So
your plan C becomes your plan A. So there can be plans and plans. And that's exactly what I believe in, Saurabh. I mean, right now I'm enjoying this. Maybe after a few years down the line, I may feel there's something else which is calling. So there could be those explorations. But yeah, you're right. As of now, the plan B works like the best plan A.
exactly, the whole thing is there should be a plan.
Yeah. Yes. Yes,
Cool.
absolutely. An advocate of it. Yeah.
Yes. So now let's dig deeper on the topic what we are discussing. I'm sure that you have a lot of experience, as you mentioned. You go to different organizations to coach people about different behaviors which can lead them to success in their professional or personal life. However, what are the other side of the house? For example, as I mentioned before, that leadership thinks or uh, thinks about positivity, but sometimes what happens that enthusiasm change to monotony, that passion for critical thinking change from being a passionate about, as I mentioned, about asking right questions to be docile in nature. So, how exactly that happens? And as we talk about toxic leadership, I would like to I would throw some light on what exactly we mean by toxic leadership or toxic in general.
Right. Thanks for that. And I think the very first thing that you talked about is how a passionate person who starts working with an aim and um, a focus in life changes, you know, in the due course. And that's exactly what we see when we talk about behavioral changes. You know, it's never an overnight change. It's always the series of events that you are prone to, you go through, and how you take on them. What kind of decisions do you make when they are happening to you? So I think transition purely defines that. You know, how what are those little steps that you took, which were either under the influence of fear or under the influence of anything else, any other surrounding that was not conducive in nature. So, what were those little things that you kept doing, and along the way, you suddenly realized that, okay, hey, this is not what I wanted to be. This is not what I'm enjoying. So it's about being aware, consciously being aware of those tiny decisions that you're making in the process. And when you don't do that, that's when you realize that things are now not going in your favor. So, coming to toxic leadership, and we've been talking about the dark side of leadership. I mean, many times, and I talk about myself. I mean, I have grown in the in the 90s, wherein it was all about listening to your seniors, following them to the T. Respect was very differently treated. Respect was no more about the work you do, but about the position you have. Hierarchies have been ingrained in us. That's the era which I have been conditioned in. I have
So
grown in.
true.
So when you come, and why I'm talking about this is because most of the leaders prevailing at this point in time. And honestly, I'll talk about geographies as well. Interestingly, this is not limited to geographies, it's across. So most of the leaders that we see around us come from this era or the previous era. So people are dealing with people like you and me sitting in the leadership positions. So when you have been conditioned to treat respect completely differently, or your concepts have been very different since childhood, then you don't understand the difference between toxicity and necessary reprimanding, you know. And when you lose this fine balance, toxicity happens. And that's exactly enough. If I've complicated it enough, now to just simplify it, it's an environment where you don't feel acknowledged, you don't see growth, you see a lot of either yelling or a lot of coldness. There's no warmth. You cannot depend on others. You are feeling lonely. You don't see a future. You seem clueless. That is an environment which we term as toxic environment, and it is in both personal or professional space. But because today we're talking about professional space, in professional space, controlling this environment is far more easier because you're not the only stakeholders. There are many other stakeholders which you can depend on. So yes, so just putting it in short is that toxic leadership is this environment where you don't feel nourished, where you feel lonely, and you know you do not see your accomplishments uh, being of any use, and then eventually you lose your motivation. Coming
Yeah,
back to what you
that's
started
true.
with.
Yeah, that's true. I think you summarized really well about different cultures, different times as well. Like what, as you mentioned about in the 90s, there's a different way of looking into garnering some kind of respect. And we do not know about what is toxic, what is about out of respect, or what is the norms, what is being discipline, and so on and so forth. That is true. And now, when you mention about the toxicity in the corporate environment, tell us more about how exactly that really works out. I mean, if I think as an employee, I mentioned that I started with all the right notes, I started with all the right excitement, but over the course, uh, as I getting tenured in the organization, maybe in a couple of months or weeks or years, I see that that is no longer is within me. Now, there are 2 points. People might say that is it because of you as a person, or is it because of the surroundings, like as a part of the people whom you work with, the people who you look up to, or working as a colleagues. So, how exactly the environment become toxic? If you can provide us some examples around that.
I will start with this, and a lot of people who are reading this who are in leadership would also know this, but I will still reiterate. University of Manchester, they surveyed 1,200 people across geographies and varying from different industries. All, and that was all about workplace culture and the environment, and how do people feel. And they found, and I'm quoting an article published by University of Manchester. They found a strong prevalence of, when they surveyed these 1,200 people, they found strong prevalence of workplace bullying, counterproductive work behavior, job dissatisfaction, and psychological stress. Now, obviously, leading to depression among subordinates, that category primarily. So, like you rightly mentioned, that there can be two things. There can be one, a personal lack of motivation, or there could be two, which is the environment. But in my opinion, it's always interlinked. A personal lack of motivation could arise from the environment, or vice versa. I mean, things like that. So now today that we're talking about leadership, I think I would primarily call it that when you see um, certain behavioral patterns in the environment that you're working, and these are, I would rather like to put it more on the signs of toxic leadership or toxic environment. Let's put it like that. What are the signs? How do you identify that this is what is happening around me? That's why probably I'm losing my motivation, my aim, my focus, my objective, which I came with, the zeal, the passion that we talk about. So that's basically, how do my colleagues treat me? What's an environment? Are we the people who give a high five and say yes, we did it, or are we the people who said, oh, I did better than you? So what kind of uh, tea conversations do I have, or what kind of coffee conversations do I have? Am I investing my time talking about the new workplace trends, and what and an ex office did better, or a certain organization is doing better, or am I spending my time talking about the environment which I don't like? So these kind of patterns that you see automatically will tell you about the mental health, the behavioral patterns of your employees as leaders. Now, as employees, let us say you are still highly motivated and you are in this kind of environment, you need to be very conscious about, why is this environment not working for you? Are you observing this kind of culture? Are you feeling that your leaders are more interested in their self growth, or are they the ones who are actually bringing the entire team together? Do you see that in next few years you will be able to gain something from this organization while you are giving this organization? You need to be going back, circling back to the very first thing that I said. You need to be consciously aware of these small progresses that life is bringing onto you. Sometimes you consciously make that, sometimes it happens around you. But you cannot let it just happen and ignore it and say, tomorrow will be a nice day. You cannot do that. I mean, that's the environment we're living in. So yeah, so we need to be very aware of what is happening. Am I observing these signs which I mentioned, like the University of Manchester also found out? And this is actually one of the important bases of toxic leadership. These are some common signs that you see around you, and if you see this around happening around you, primarily because of certain people, and the sentiment is common among a certain bunch of individuals, then don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. You need to take some action around it. What is that action? Probably we can talk about it now, or maybe in some other conversation that we may have. Up to you, Saurabh.
Yes, definitely. What kind of actions we can take? We can talk. Before that, I just would like to add, as you rightly mentioned, is that these things are not, as you rightly mentioned, that mostly it impacts the individual and eventually the organization or a team as a whole. But it's also pretty much important that what kind of surroundings you are in, because that also drives your motivation. So there are two sides across the fence. One is the toxic leaders, and the other side is maybe a toxic employees.
Yes,
As a
absolutely.
leader, I think if I think from the leader perspective, maybe they have all the right things to start with. They have all the right culture, but still the thing slips through. And more so, maybe in the remote environment when you are not having that human to human physical connection, it's more towards the virtual. So it might be possible that what they are looking at, for example, if a lot of colleagues are not very comfortable in video chat, they may not see the body language, right? If something is going wrong and maybe they have to ask right questions, is everything fine with you, for example? uh, that is one of the aspects. And the other aspect is from the employee side, wherein, as I mentioned, that yeah, surrounding is important, but how exactly they are trying to go through their own self development and try to eject out from that place. Because if something is not working out, sustaining in that environment itself is, I think, more from your side. You have to take a part of that suffering and eventually the consequences as well. So, considering these two sides, if I ask, like, from the toxic leadership perspective, if I take the leaders as an example, what are the actions you're talking about? What are the actions a leader can take if they have all the right intentions, however, the things are going south?
Right. Okay. I'll talk about it, but I also want to, if you may allow, I would
Yes,
like to
please.
talk about some of the real time examples that happen around us, which could be directly understood as toxic leadership. Because we talked about symptoms of toxic leadership, we talked about environment, but I think, also as a coach, I think it's extremely important to talk about some of the real signs that you see around you. So, if you think we can talk about it,
Sure,
then I
please.
would just like to quote one or two. So, many times when you see your leaders, and now again, this leadership is vast area, right? I could be a leader, and then there could be a leader above me, and so on and so forth. So this applies to most of the people in an organization, from mid level to above and top. So I'll give you one example, one or two examples that happened with me. So initially, when I was working with one of the leaders, he had a habit of putting the last minute pressure on me. Now, this doesn't sound alien, right? This happens quite often. So the
Yes.
last minute pressure, when it's handled to you, it can be handled in two ways. It could be handled one way, saying that, Neha, I really need your help. I know I'm coming to you last minute, but this is really important for our XYZ work, whatever project we've been handling. The other could be that, Neha, tomorrow is the deadline. We need to do this. Leave everything aside. This needs to be done. And the moment I tell you that, listen, I have something on my table, he says, listen, this needed to be finished today. I am giving you timeline till tomorrow. So I'm already thinking about it. I'm already considering, your work in hand. Now, this is called as, this can be termed and coined more under gaslighting. So when you see things like these happenings, or let us say when there's been a timeline, deadline or timeline which you're supposed to meet, and which leader is questioning your ability to deliver on time, especially questioning your memory, these things can be termed under gaslighting. So don't ignore these kind of signs. Now, what you can do around it, what leaders can do, what employees can do, I mean, in whichever hierarchy you are, is that in that case, try to find out a way to document things. Probably that could be your way out. It's because, see, we all know that we are living in an environment where things have become volatile, right? The VUCA world that we call. Now, in this kind of environment, you cannot be jumping on jobs. So you need to find your way out, and that's also your way to growth. So you need to identify what is happening wrong, and then you need to start taking an action around what could be done better in this particular situation. So gaslighting is, this is one thing which happened very often with me, and then later I realized, I said no, what I know is right and what I'm doing is right. It's just that the process is not right. Probably I need to bring that to more structure. So yes, I just felt that this was important for me to talk about. Hence, I did that. I gave that anecdote. Now, I just have a question. Can we take a quick little break, like just like 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
I have to
Let me
plug in
see. I
my
think
charger.
I'm I'm just trying to see. I think I don't have a pause button here just to end recording. That is the only option we have.
So that's fine. I can. Oh, so you are saying we cannot? Can I? But I need to get the charger. There's no other way out. Give me a
Yeah,
second.
yeah. You go ahead. You go ahead. Uh, so while Neha is coming back, I would like to just also like I see that there are a lot of people who are enjoying our content here, and I think as I mentioned in one of my videos, around 60 to 70% people like the videos, but they do not subscribe. So please, subscription is one of the things which we really value because the subscribers can also help us to get more quality guests. So please, in case where you think that you're really getting the value out of all these things, what we are going through the initiatives, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And your one subscription definitely makes a lot of difference in the way how we function and in our growth as well.
Great. Yes, Saurabh, I'm back and ready.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Now we can take the last segment that you're talking about.
Yes. So I have a question around that. So you mentioned about the example, right, where the manager comes and he or she mentioned that okay, this is something which has to be done as soon as possible. It's urgent. Now there are different ways to tackle that, and as you mentioned that from the employee side, it may not be possible. You do not know what that person is going through in the life, and what they have a plan. And then you said that tomorrow we have to deliver this, and there is a way to land that message as well. So you mentioned about the employee perspective that okay, you may have to either look into other options or try to make that environment better. Now, from the leader perspective, if I think that it's really a pressing requirement, right? So we have to do it, but I just want to make sure that I land that message with full empathy, with full understanding, and at the same time respect for the person. So how exactly you would kind of give that perspective that okay, how would a leader should land those messages in the way that it has to be done as well, and it has taken care of all the things which takes care of the employee well-being as well.
I think number one is keeping your self interest below your team's interest. Once you have that, once you know what is in favor of the entire team, that is when you take an extra effort of knowing your team better. You cannot rise up today and say the team doesn't trust me, or the team thinks I'm showing disparity. It doesn't work like that. It's a process. The team has been observing you.
Yeah.
Any leader is put under the radar of judgment. Just a second. I'm sorry. The weather
Mm.
is changing really bad in India, and
That's fine. If you want to have a glass of water, you can.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. So yes, so I was saying that any leader who does not know what is the team all about, what's the DNA of the team. A leader is the pack of the wolf, right? Uh, Sorry, a leader is the actually the one who's driving it all. So
Driving it all.
uh, if the leader doesn't know what is the DNA of the team, then everything gets back to the same question: that why is that happening? So I think the very first thing you can do is have more of your meaningful coffee conversations, which are not just about workplace. Try to understand your team better. Try to find out your motivation better. For example, if someone tells me today that, Neha, you need to every day run for 10 kilometers, that will make you fit and healthy, and you will lead a better life, as compared to someone telling me that, Neha, you need to run every morning 10 kilometers so that you are fit and healthy and you can travel the world, because your energy will only improve and traveling will be so easy. I'll be far more motivated in the second example as compared to the first one, because the second one brings in my motivation of travel as compared to uh, a equally important but not so important for me sort of a proposition. So a leader needs to understand what motivates their team members and what drives them. Once you know that, then you'll be able to, and that, like you very started very well, that it cannot be a same recipe for all. It will change. It's like parenting. It will change from your team member to team member. So I think knowing your team members very well, knowing where they're coming from, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, will really tell you how to have that same conversation differently with different people, driving on to the results that you want to drive.
Exactly. So I think that's what you rightly mentioned, that as a leader, you have to, if you want to understand what's going right and wrong, you have to spend more time with your team, whether virtually or physically, based on whatever the industry you're working for. And at the same time, you have to cultivate that culture as well, where people can ask questions, where people can kind of challenge you on your thoughts. Because if it's not, for example, if I say that we have to do XYZ and then everyone is like, yes, and it's a silence, it seems that that is not the way how
Absolutely.
the environment should be. Yep. You have perspective on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, you cannot have the culture of fear in an organization, in your team. And I remember one of the leaders who I really appreciated throughout my life still is somebody who would always put me in the front for all the good things that are happening, and would always find alone time to reprimand me, something as basic as that, right? So
Yeah.
you need to do that. That's how you can overcome the culture of toxicity. And even mediation is very important. For example, if you see that there's something going around which is toxic in nature, you need to sometimes also step up and mediate in the process of letting the other person know that this is not working. A lot of times these leaders don't even know that the team is feeling toxicity. So that's where mediation also plays a big role.
Exactly. So let's get to the concluding part of our conversation, and I know that in this there are so many things to discuss, but the whole intention of these particular conversations, specifically from Let's Talk as well, is to make people think, not to provide any judgment in terms of the answers, because you have to look for your own answers. We are here to make you think, to make your own decisions. And that being said, what exactly you, maybe two or three things you would like to provide to the audience from both the leaders and subordinate side of the house, how they can overcome or find that their environment is toxic.
How can they find that the environment is toxic?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Find, maybe, yeah, find would be a right one. Overcome, obviously, we already discussed. Yeah, find would be a right
Yes.
word. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I think first and foremost is to identify the culture you are in. Like I've been talking about, we've been talking about workplace culture so much. And when I talk about that, it basically could be something as basic as when you look for concern for well-being of yours. So how much is your environment um, pushing about your own well-being? And when I say your own well-being, it starts in a workplace. It actually starts from mental well-being. So if you see that your environment, your leaders are being aware about your well-being, your mental well-being, and it's not eventually becoming a burden onto you, that's when it's all going good. But if it's vice versa, then it's an alarm, right? It's for both. It's honestly for both, because like I said, it's like spectrum. It's a circle, so it's for both, for the team members and leaders as well. I think the second thing is a culture of appreciation and feedback. So, constructive feedback, like which we've been talking about. So, um, let me just bust this myth. People think a lot of times that leaders who are loud, there are leaders, like we were talking about the conditioning, right? So there are leaders who believe in an environment of loudness, and they would shout and they would express with their entire body, and that's their style, that's their personality. So a lot of times we get confused with this personality being toxic, but a leader who is quiet, shy, speaks in a very, in a base tone, could also be toxic. So let's not confuse it with personality of people. Toxicity has to do less with the outer appearance and more with the actions that you do. So the
Yeah,
second
you're
thing that
like a passive aggressive, you're saying those.
yes, so an aggressiveness does not always means toxicity, you
Yeah.
know. Like a lot of times you would see there is a leader who's pushing you, always making you do more than what you could do, and in the end you see results are always in your favor, or maybe most of the times the results are in your favor. You feel accomplished, you feel you have come out of your comfort zone, and that derives respect for your leader. On the other hand, you would see the leader pushing you, asking you to do more than you could do, or asking you to chew more than you could chew, and in the end when you fail, give you, you know two more statements of of discouragement. So the second part is where you need to understand that it's toxic. So this is how you can find, in your feedbacks, like coming back to that, right? That acknowledgement, or appreciation and feedback. What's the balance of these two things? Are you feeling that the feedback is helping you grow? Are you feeling that the acknowledgement is making you feel understand, making you feel gratified? In simple sense, a lot of us have a feeling of gratification, want gratification, sometimes instant gratification. So that's number three. And I think last, for this particular discussion, although there could be tiny little more, and like you rightly said, that each one of us are intellectual, intelligent human beings. We know what are our signs, is just that we put them a little aside, is to observe that whether uh, my leadership is considering organizations growth, teams growth as a priority, or their individual growth as a priority. Because I, coming from the space of media communications marketing, I have seen some of the leaders wanting to snatch the limelight all the time and not let anybody else come in picture at all. So that's where you realize that this is not where I would grow. This I could learn, I need to learn and move, you know so yeah, I think primarily these three things, and an open culture, coming circling back to the culture, open environment, a culture of growth, appreciation, feedback, is what you need to identify, observe, and nurture.
Exactly. That's great. So basically, it's about what I'm hearing is about culture. Try to have a 360-degree kind of a feedback, and I think most importantly is every individual has to be a seeker. You cannot get answers for each and everything. You have to find your own answers. So the more you think about certain things, and specifically the toxic environment in the context we are talking today, you will understand that when someone say, how do I know, you will know it as a human being, because when you start working and thinking about how the things are working, you don't have to ask anyone that whether this environment is toxic or not. And this is something, again, goes both the sides. Sometimes if you think that someone is not working as the way they're supposed to, you can have those communications. So there are a lot of things, but I guess audience and the people who are viewing or listening today must have got some idea to kind of explore that how exactly they can find a toxic environment, or I would say a toxic leadership in different walks of the life. So that being said, thank you so much, Neha, for providing some insights and sharing your perspective on that. And I would also urge all the people who are viewing and watching, please write it in the comments. So, what do you think about if you have your own personal experience about it, or what how exactly you overcame in that environment? Again, from both the sides, from the employee and from the leadership. So, Neha, thank you so much again, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors and a fantastic 2023.
Thank you very much. Wish you the same, and wish Let's Talk also a lot of success and a lot of podcasts, and we enjoy it thoroughly. And many more heights to you as well, Saurabh. Keep doing well. God
Sure.
bless.
Thank you.